Welcome back. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us here on Living in Mexico. You can follow us on Twitter at Mexico Daily, or you can follow me on my personal Twitter account, which is at AM Salazar. They're both useful accounts to find information about what's going on in Mexico. And there's a lot going on. So thank you. Thanks so much for joining us. And one of the issues that was brought up this week, in part because it has to do with a decision by Mexico's bank. A decision was made by the Bank of Mexico to increase in a surprising way interest rates, and we'll talk about that in a second. But it kind of compounded the news, or there was more interest regarding this news because of statements made by President Manuel Lopez Obrador during his morning press conference, where he basically said that there's no need for alarm due to the increase of the interest rates in Mexico, inflation, in Mexico, because he said that, he has a vision, a very different vision. It wasn't, when he was speaking, it wasn't even clear he knew exactly what the interest rate, but inflation increased in Mexico. It's now at 7.91 in January. And of course, they're blaming certain products, bananas and lemons, for this increase. But just generally speaking, when people talk about how much they're spending just on food, there's kind of general consensus that we're spending much more this January than in the last couple of months. So, and the president just basically said there's no need to alarm. And there also was some statements made by the person who's in charge of protecting the Consumer Protection Agency, who was, when they asked him about eggs, the increase in eggs, he just said, well, it's wintertime and it's cold, and hens don't lay as many eggs as they should. So it's concerning, and that's why I think it's about time we start talking about what's going on with inflation and how is it linked to this decision of the Bank of Mexico to increase interest rates in a very surprising fashion. Joining us today, and he's been joining us throughout the years, is Sergio Negrete. He is a retired professor at ITESO. He's an expert analyst on economy and finance. And once again, I really appreciate you joining us, Sergio. Let's talk about, before we talk about this confusion of statements made by President Manuel Lopez Obrador during the press conference, just walk us through what happened this week in terms of the increase in interest rate by the Bank of Mexico. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. And as you say, many years now.
Yeah.
It was a big surprise. Came practically as a shock, in the
Mm-hmm.
sense that all the markets expected a move, an increase, similar to the Federal Reserve. That is
In the United
one
States,
in the
correct,
US,
right.
one
Yeah.
quarter of a point, 25 basis
Mm-hmm.
points. And instead it was half a point,
Mm-hmm.
taking the gap between the US and Mexican interest rates to 6.25%. I mean, that's a huge, enormous gap.
Yeah.
The Bank of Mexico rate now stands at 11%, that of
Mm-hmm.
the US at 4.75. So, well, that was the initial shock, the bigger than expected increase. And that was because inflation is proving to be, as you mentioned, quite stubborn. Not only
Mm-hmm.
stubborn, but going up again, edging up. And therefore,
Mm-hmm.
well, I think that the central bank reacted very powerfully with its main instrument, the interest rate. And in that
Mm-hmm.
sense, that explains, of course, the increase. The president didn't like it, but well, no president really likes an increase in interest rates, neither
Mm-hmm.
in the US nor in Mexico. They are not as vocal as Lopez Obrador. Well, Trump was, but
Right.
indeed, but well, Trump was Trump, as they always say. And but yeah, Lopez Obrador does. He's always musing about that there should be some kind of alternative to these kind of interest rate increases, that they are
Mm-hmm.
orthodox. He's right. That
Mm-hmm.
they are neoliberal. Well, I would rather say that they are normal. And
Mm-hmm.
he's always kind of talking about an alternative that he never really gets down to it. But that's what happened with Lopez Obrador today, among other things.
Well, I guess concerning in terms of the inflation rate in Mexico is that, and maybe we can remind our audience about the strategy that was implemented by the Mexican government last year, which in fact allowed companies to import food, meat, and other goods from other parts of the world, and I'm very focused on the meat part, without any real inspection. And this, of course, has created a lot of concern for the local producers, farmers, and meat producers in Mexico. One, because they're, it could be considered unfair competition, but two, there's just not the inspection that they're supposed to have, but beyond the debate as to whether, there should be more inspection or more imports, the bottom line, it just doesn't seem that this strategy has worked, and it's creating more pressure on local producers. That's on the one hand. And then you also have another announcement this week, and it's not clear how this is going to work out, but that the price of gasolines are going to go up because the government is going to be providing less subsidies. So I'm just wondering, what is the strategy right now for controlling inflation in Mexico?
Well, the strategy, frankly, I don't think the president has one, in the sense
Mm-hmm.
that he has left this much in the hands of the Bank of Mexico.
Right.
Not because that he doesn't mind. Obviously, he knows about inflation, as so many people of his
Mm-hmm.
generation, and he worries about inflation, but he doesn't really see the government as dealing or fighting so much inflation, other, this is crucial, than the
Mm-hmm.
gasoline subsidy, as you have mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that is because not so much of financial matters, that a little, but it's really a political issue, because the president, as we know, as a candidate and as president, he really gives a lot of political weight to the price of gasoline in Mexico,
Yeah.
that it is. And it's very political because one person made it very political throughout the years, and that's now the current president. So, well, he's
Mm-hmm.
now in a certain way paying for what the monster that he created. The gasoline subsidy last year, 2022, was 373 billion pesos,
Wow.
and that's quite, it's something that
Mm-hmm.
rather you spend on health or
Mm-hmm.
so many other things that you can spend that kind of money. But well, that was the cost. So I suppose that he's now
Mm-hmm.
trying to reduce a little, somewhat, that subsidy. Moreover, because the price of oil is kind of edging down. So well,
Mm-hmm.
all it's combining, but certainly the main inflation fighter right now in Mexico is not the federal government that it should be,
Mm-hmm.
but the Bank of Mexico, and that's why it is increasing interest rates as much. And indeed, even with the strong peso that we have right now, I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
exchange rate is 18.66 pesos per dollar. That's very strong,
Mm-hmm.
among the strongest exchange rates we have had in several years. And even with that kind of exchange rate, you are not having inflation coming down. So, well, the only instrument available really is the interest rate.
I don't blame the president for worrying about the price of gasoline. I mean, if you kind of look throughout the world, particularly in Latin America, when the price of gasoline goes up, there is protests. I mean, governments have fallen every time they threaten to raise the price of gasoline or the price of public transportation, which, eventually public transportation, the price may have to go up simply because, you're paying more for gasoline. But so I don't blame him for trying to keep the price of gasoline within a range. I mean, it seems that at this stage, and kind of looking around the world, looking at, for example, what's happening in the United States. You have the United States, for the president, Joe Biden had his State of the Union address, and he's kind of showing off and assuring that the price of inflation has been, that inflation is going down. And it's important for him politically because, he wants to be reelected as president. But in the case of Mexico, I mean, it seems that there hasn't been any political costs for such high high prices of food, at least up until now. I don't know. Do you foresee that the inflation in Mexico will continue to hike? Or do you think the Bank of Mexico is going to have some relative success in terms of imposing these high interest rates as a way of controlling the flow of money, cash in the market, as a way of also controlling inflation?
I think it's going to be successful. However, what we are seeing, the latest information data, is
Mhm,
that it's going to take longer than expected. It's going to
mhm,
take more time, and it's going to take higher interest rates. I mean, interest rates are not as effective in Mexico as in the US because
mhm,
not so many people, just to give you an example, use a credit card or have a mortgage. So that's more than enough to
mhm,
explain why in Mexico it's not really as useful, as powerful an economic instrument as it's in the US. But well, it works, just it's
mhm,
going to take longer. And therefore, it's not really that shocking that the interest rate will keep going up at least 25 basis points more. That was the also
mhm.
part of the announcement of the Bank of Mexico. Let's see when and
What-
where we will reach that what they call now the terminal interest rate. But
mhm.
I don't know. Think of 11.5%. That's very high.
That's very high. Now, what about the US? I mean, we also have to watch very closely what's happening in the US. Do you foresee important hikes in the next couple of months, or do you think it's pretty much reached the Fed has reached its limit?
No, no. From what I have, read as everybody,
Right.
no. The feeling I have of Jay Powell as chairman of the Fed is that
Mm-hmm.
let me say this, he really is trying to kill inflation. I mean, he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
want to kind of, okay, let's just stop here and see what happens. Rather, okay, let's go really for the kill, to finish off inflation. So I really foresee at least, I would say, two more increases
Mm.
to the interest rate. But this
Wow.
is, I guess, estimate as so many
Mm-hmm.
others.
And,
But
and of course, if we don't have something, tremendous or horrible happening, I mean, we're still talking about the war in Ukraine, and we were not expecting that war to last as long as it has lasted. It's going on 1 year. And then, of course, there's the presidential elections and all the chaos that comes about with the decisions being made, thinking more on the electoral process, both here in Mexico and in the United States, which is an electoral process that's already started, even though the elections are next year. Let me ask you one last question in terms of the peso. Do you think it's going to continue to fall, to reevaluate, or is this all pretty much linked to interest rates and decisions by the Fed and the Bank of Mexico?
oh, yes, I expect it to continue increasing, first of all, because of this most recent jump in
Hmm.
interest rate in Mexico. It makes it very
Hmm.
attractive to save in pesos. So
Hmm.
yes, I expect an inflow of money, because of these kind of interest rates. Not so much money leaving Mexico. So well, the combination is just a strengthening of the exchange rate. Having said that, you already have a strong peso. So uh, to how much, if you want my guess, very happy to deliver, I guess, is around 1850. That's not very far, right, really, from where we are now. But the really, rather than how much it's going to strengthen further, that I think a little, is the fact that it's going to remain strong. The peso sooner or later, we all know this in Mexico, goes down. It depreciates. But with this kind of interest rate, we can really expect it to continue strong, at least while we have this kind of huge gap between the both interest rates. Eh, Ana Maria, I don't know if you can hear me. I stopped hearing you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Now, I clearly, I don't know. I always enjoy talking to you. I don't know if this was good news or bad news, but clearly the president wasn't happy with the increased interest rate by the Bank of Mexico this week. So it'll be interesting to see what, if anything, the the government, the government of Mexico, any steps they may take in trying to at least, I don't know if they can curtail it, but at least stop the growth, because we are about, we're going to be 8, 9 very, very soon, unless, they take important steps. So I don't know. We're going to keep on watching. And as you know, it's always great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's always great to be with you, Ana Maria. Thank you so much to
Thank
give the
you,
time. Thank you.
Jorge, Dr. Jorge Negrete. He is a retired professor from ITESO, financial economic analyst who's been joining us throughout the years. I always enjoy talking to him. We're going to go to commercial break. I'm Ana Maria Salazar, and you're listening and watching Living in Mexico. Don't go away. We have much more ahead. Don't go away. I'll be right back.